great show. You're saying, I don't know what show to listen to. Stop listening to Fox News and start listening to Patriot Strong Podcast. Stop listening to fake media and Newsweek and Newsmax and start listening to the Patriot Strong Podcast. Make it your daily mission to listen to this podcast and share it with your friends. Thank you so much, Courtney. Have a great day.
Hi, friends. Thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. I know it is getting closer and closer to the holidays, but we are living in some crazy, crazy times. So I want to continue to bring the actual truth, the actual news to as many people as I can, because we all know that we cannot count on mainstream media. Now, we have witnessed some crazy things happen just within the last couple of weeks, from the mess that's going on in Canada with Trudeau. Trump saying there's a possibility of Canada becoming the 51st state. Don't know what's up with that. Hope to dive into that tonight. The crazy amount of drones that are being witnessed and seen all over the country. In New Jersey, Ohio Air Force was shut down. Wright Pat Air Force Base was shut down, which is just like an hour north of us here in Ohio. In New Jersey, New York, all the things, and they don't know what it is, or do they? You guys know the intel that our guest tonight has is par none. And I'm so excited to welcome back to the show, Juan. Thank you so much for chiseling out some of your time. I appreciate you so much.
Oh yeah, no, I enjoy it. Enjoy talking with the folks and try to put everybody on the right path here on subjects like the drones and like that. So, yeah.
And that's what I know that we have exchanged a few texts back and forth just about that. So I would really like your insights in all of this.
Well, okay, let's just dive right through it real quick, because it's not that long of a conversation.
Okay.
The short version is, in order to operate drones, you have two methods that are currently in use. You have pilots that have to fly those drones, and they need to know the areas they're working in. And you have AI, artificial intelligence, that augments the pilots and gets things to certain places, looks for stuff, and then one pilot can actually manage a number of drones. And as it needs extra assistance or it comes across things that are anomalous, then other crew members can dive in to look at what's being seen and verify certain information. And within that zone, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission came out and said, yes, we lost some nuclear material, but don't anybody worry. It won't kill anybody, and it's, at worst might cause a burn on the skin or some discomfort, but no permanent damage. And so what's that about? Well, I would propose to everybody here that what you're watching was a cover story concerning this missing material. In the radio world, the old shortwave era and all that, we would have what's called a fox hunt. And so they'd hide a transmitter somewhere that would be emitting a signal, and you'd know maybe possible potential various signals that it might use or in a zone, but might not even know the exact frequency. And sometimes you would, sometimes you wouldn't, depending on how complex it was. And then they turn everybody loose, and you go try to find the fox or find this transmitter. In the real world, unlike, say, a military training situation, you just don't, there's so many complexities and variations. And by the way, think of it in terms like this. Imagine all those Google cars that are running all over the country on the streets, and they have cameras all over the place. You go look at your house, and you see the Google pictures of your own house on your street, and like you might see any one of your cars there. Well, I can look at the car and say, well, that car was in the driveway like 4 months ago, so that was That's what they were looking at that day. That's how old that picture is. So they have satellite, they have street view, things like that. Well, things change, but you do need to get like markers for location, a grid, something like that, including, let's say, a location where you have a bunch of um, shipping containers or a dock or a rail yard, a trucking yard. So if you had to go actually search for a real nuclear warhead, let's say, or some other thing that could be a major threat, by having those views in not just available to you by satellite or car or something like that, but exactly the way you would see them from a drone perspective, and then also know what things you see in the background as you do certain things. Because these drones, if they're looking for nuclear material, they'll send out a pulse of neutrons, and neuron would be brain activity, neutrons. And what happens if it hits fissionable material? 239, 235, 238 uranium. If it hits that material, it causes a reaction. And if you're looking with the right kinds of tools, you can see that reaction of a signature that can be read and looked at, and kind of a noise that jumps out of the background noise. But depending on where you're at, there's different things that could pop up that could snooker you. So all these people saying they don't know where the drones are, it was a classified program run by a particular agency that most people don't even know the names of, but it's a global operation, U.S. based. But anyway, they're doing several different things, and mapping all that stuff, training operators. They're expanding it further out across the country with other stuff that's in play that's expanding over other areas of the country. So first off, it's not space aliens. It's not soul snatchers. It's not all the silliness, because all of that's actually been said. It's not something that's unknown to other federal agencies. They're just not briefed in on it. And so we've had a number of people, including Trump himself. What did Trump do? He came out a couple weeks ago and he said, you know, well, shoot him down. Why did he do that? Um, well, because if it's something that's there to inhibit and spook people and set up for, say, a false flag or something, maybe he was kind of sending a hint. The other side of the coin is, let me just please ask everybody, please don't shoot any of the drones down that you might think you saw. Those shotgun shell rounds, those bullets are real and can easily go places you didn't plan on and hurt somebody. So please don't do that. And um, uh, yeah, years ago, there was a case in Manhattan Beach where a gentleman was walking on the beach, just enjoying a nice, afternoon walk. And people that saw him on the beach just said, well, he just fell over. He was walking along, looked fine, and just fell right over. And they thought he'd had a heart attack. And so police came, looked at him and everything, didn't see anything, no understanding what it was. And he was taken to the hospital. They did an x-ray, getting ready to do the autopsy. And here's a bullet came in straight in the middle of his head, straight down. He was walking upright, just walking down the beach, and a bullet hit him. Imagine somebody fired a bullet in the air. It went up, curved over, came back down, And in the square foot he was walking, at the exact instant he was there, that bullet could have come down 1 second sooner or later and missed him or grazed him. But it came down at the exact location where he was at that exact moment. Really an impossibility for anybody to have planned or targeted it that way. It was just a freak anomaly. But somebody fired a bullet in the air, it came down and killed that man. Um, you know, People don't understand what happens with bullets a lot of times and ricochets and things like that. So just going out randomly shooting down drones, don't. Okay. We know exactly whose they are. And a number of key people have come back and admitted, yes, these are part of a U.S. government operation. It's silly to think they're Chinese, Iranian, everything else. They're not. And there have been simulations going on. But why is that? Because I also mentioned months and months ago in a couple of different locations that there was a threat coming up on the election. I first mentioned it back in late August and again early September. There was briefings that had happened. Those briefings became steadier and steadier. They moved up to daily and then twice a day in the days just before the election on a particular threat that is a particular drone type of threat and operators here in the U.S. They aren't being flown from the other side of the world. These were drones that had been pre-positioned here. And the allegation of some of the people that were tracking this was that there was going to be an attempt to disrupt or delay the election process. Those briefings became twice a day coming up in the election. Nothing happened. Did the threat go away? No. There was enough eyes on it and probably an understanding that it wasn't going to actually either the principles may be known or it wasn't going to go off the way they wanted to because there's so much attention on it that they didn't try it. Does that mean it could still be tried at some point in time? Absolutely. And so that we have a counter force that is training and has drones in the air, anticipating something is not wrong. And by the way, in military terms, generally, whatever the threat is, if it's a ship, a plane, a tank, you counter that threat with a platform of the same type. That's the most effective way to counter a threat. And so if it's a drone threat, then you would counter it with drones. If there's thousands or hundreds of thousands of drones involved, or even millions, then you need enough that can counter it that way. And if you looked at the Army-Navy game the other day, in the advertising during the Army-Navy game, they showed a military situation where an enemy snuck up on our shores and then released swarms of small drones headed for targets inside, the country. And then a defensive platform surfaced off the shoreline and released counter drones. Some operator pushing the button in the control room in a military location. And the counter drones went out and destroyed all the drones that were coming in. And, he goes back to drinking his coffee. That's kind of the thing that is being envisioned. And Elon, back in the very tail end of September, said something also. He says, I anticipate somewhere out there in the not too distant future that we will have a drone war bigger than anybody could ever imagine. And of course, at the end of the day, he was coding in that this what was in these private briefings. Now, here in the last few days, because Trump said first shoot him down, and then a few days later that got everybody's attention. Then he said, "Well, I think they're looking for nuclear materials that could be used for a dirty bomb." And of course, the nuclear materials that could be used for a dirty bomb would be missing nuclear materials, which the National Nuclear Regulatory Commission said is missing. So then others have come out since then, suggesting that Trump violated his secrecy oaths, his NDAs, concerning the briefings that he had gotten prior to the election and after, concerning this particular threat. And they want to make a big thing out of it. So at the end of the day, it's pretty obvious what's going on here. Our government is behind the drones. If it was somebody else's, they'd be out there taking them out in a heartbeat. They need to be able to train for that in a real world environment and create appropriate maps, and including what the drones see at various locations, so they have something for comparative analysis if they decide they actually have something that they've located. And then the final piece of this whole puzzle, and it's nothing new, we've been looking for realistically about 35 to 40 years for about 50 to 100 estimate of 50 to 100 missing warheads from Ukraine back at the time that the Soviet Union was collapsing and the satellite nations were breaking away. And those were never properly accounted for. Russian military equipment and artillery and guns and bullets and everything out of Ukraine was being sold off by generals. And so we've had plenty of books written on this and people talking about it. And several of them were recovered. But several that are known and that people actually have physically seen and touched are still out in the loose. And plus a couple of our own in a very bizarre situation. So with that in mind, having an ability to have drones get up close and personal and do what we call an interrogation, sending out these neutron signals and then seeing if they see a response that tells you there's fissionable material there, is probably a pretty important thing. And then there's other stuff, could be something like ricin, which many people believe is what's going to be used to shut down Washington, D.C. at some point in the not too distant future, and would probably cause us to have to abandon Washington, D.C. So there's a lot of things in play, but the drones that are there right this second are not a threat. And other than if they were being used as some pretense to do something, lots of variables there that might disrupt Trump from coming in, from the January 6th thing occurring with the count of the Electoral College, or January 20th or something like that, or some emergency condition where power can't be transferred because of a national emergency, and that would keep Biden or Harris in office in spite of all that. So anyway, those are the kinds of things that are out there that are in there, but it's not like they don't know who these drones are. They know exactly.
Right. And that's something that a lot of us, we have to still keep in the forefront of our mind. I feel like everything on the surface has been going a little bit too smoothly. I don't know. I just feel like everything's been going too smoothly for us to be 100% like all in. Trump is going to be sworn in, no problems at all. I feel like there's so much that could still happen. And
Oh, by
a
the
lot
way, I
of
just got to
people.
tell you one little thing. The reason I'm standing right here is because there's a beaver that's a beaver house. And he's been building something. He thinks he's going to block this whole river or something, but that's where he lives. You see him come out sometimes this time of night. But he was gathering sticks. He's got a really nice house going there. I'm sure it's got big screen TV. He's got
All the
probably a
things.
garage for the jet ski in there. All of the stuff. Probably got the kids and wife in there having dinner right now. But I was hoping
Oh
he'd
my
come out
gosh.
and visit us. So anyway, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was just saying that I think a lot of people need to, keep in the forefront of their mind that there are so many things that could happen between now and, like you were just saying, January 6th, whenever they certify, January 20th, whenever he's sworn in, or even out until March. And I think that we kind of stepped on those topics a little bit the last time that you were on. But, there's so much going on that's going to affect the United States, I think, including what's happening in the Middle East right now with uh, Israel and Yemen and the missile strikes and all of that. Do you think that we're going to try and involve ourselves in that, and then that will put the United States into like a nuclear war kind of situation?
Well, let me think about the way you said that just one more time. And how are you thinking they might be trying to get us into a nuclear war?
I was asking you if you think that's going to happen, if you think Biden is going to try to involve us, and then like you said earlier, that would put us into maybe a martial law kind of situation where the transfer of power wouldn't happen as everybody might be expecting it to be.
Well, let me just say it this way. Uh, Somewhere in here, we are being herded to some kind of a nuclear showdown with Russia. And this has been coming for a very long time. And the people that are doing this, um, they think of Ukraine. You had all of this money laundering, all of
Right.
the stuff going on. Biden saying that we saw, we forced to stop a criminal investigation into money laundering going on in Ukraine. And that was a crime scene. They got the prosecutors to back off, and then they have this war there. What has the war really accomplished? It covered the trail for all the payoffs and money laundering that were going through Ukraine into political systems all over the world. The Iranian money that Obama sent over, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. Uh, Most of that was laundered through Ukraine and then back to other locations, and pretty startling. So it's like the mob. They go in, they do a restaurant, they do a sporting goods store, and they take it over. They run up a bunch of bills, for goods. They take all the goods and sell them off somewhere else. They bankrupt it, and then they have an insurance fire, and they got insured by 3 or 4 insurance companies for triple value, uh, and they make money all the way, every step of the way. Well, that's Ukraine, and they've covered the trail. They're burning it all down, so you can never get to the truth of all the things that have gone on there. You can't prove anything because any of the players are dead or scattered. The paperwork, the infrastructure where you could go track the records, it's all burned down. At some level, these players that we're really fighting with right now for control of the world want a nuclear conflict. They want to burn it all down, baby, so that no one can ever figure out, who was the criminal, who was the good guy, where'd the money go, who's got it. They want a Phoenix moment with these families. The story of the Phoenix is that um, it lives for 500 years. And then when it's ready to die, it goes and builds a funeral pyre, all the things that can burn. And then it nests in the middle of the fire and it lays an egg. And then it burns up in its own funeral pyre. And out of this egg, it's reborn. And so that's the story of the phoenix. And there's variations of it. There's, a dozen different ways they tell the story. But these are these families, the same families by bloodline, but they go by different names. They reinvent themselves, but they use the same symbology and imagery generation to generation. And so you see them back to Babylon, Egypt, Rome, and since, and these bloodline families, and they want you to lose track of them and their, self-serving criminality operations. So if in this era they can cause a nuclear conflict that convolutes everything out of the chaos order, and it's their new world order. The question is, will they be obliged this time around with this funeral pyre, or will we catch them this time? And the reality is, we are in an amazing moment where I believe we are going to catch them, have caught them, and going to stop them from doing what they want to do. But it's going to come to a nuclear standoff, Cuban Missile Crisis type moment. And by God's grace, no nuclear devices will be used, we pray. But it will come to that in order to bring forth all the things that have to happen, and a decisive move of power here in the United States from the continuity and government operation, which we know of as Senior Executive Service, SES, and the military side, which is Strategic Command and NORAD. And in that moment, Senior Executive Service claims to have authority over nuclear stuff and programs, et cetera, but they don't have physical access to those facilities that were locked up by Trump. And in an actual attack mode, the systems scram, and all data, information, et cetera, goes back to a central repository, along with access codes, et cetera. Any SAP or special access programs, including anything over at SES. So in that environment, it would decisively go to a military command, and the commander in chief is the president. And so his authority, and then those around him. So there's very precise things, even just short of that, where if there is certain types of treasonous, traitorous activities, then the protective veil or shield around the president is the Marines and a military intelligence, military court, military justice that kicks in, and that's exactly what's going to happen. That's why Guantanamo, when Trump was being queried by Hillary Clinton in a debate, and under his breath he says, I built it for you, referring to Guantanamo in its reconstruction, and referring to Hillary Clinton. So anyway, that's, the stuff is there. I don't know if I answered your question exactly or not.
No, yeah, no, absolutely. I was reading through some of the topics on X today, and a lot of people are talking about things that Trump has said on Truth Social regarding BRICS and Canada. And I know a lot of things are happening behind the scenes. He kind of touched on maybe Canada becoming part of the United States. And we've also seen recently that there are a couple people rumored to be stepping down soon, including Trudeau. Do you think that there's any truth to anything that's being said, like rumored around that?
Well, let me kind of go places that probably not very many people have gone here recently. There's, I've been saying for several decades actually that, and this is something that has been spoken of behind the scenes for a very, very long time, that before this is over, Canada will be aligned with the U.S. and disaligned from the Commonwealth or the British operation. And that they essentially would free themselves, and then we would become extremely close partners. Not so much that we actually take Canada on as a state or anything like that. They'll maintain their independence, but we will have a different type of alignment. And that also goes for New Zealand and Australia. And there's actually some other stuff out there that lends credence to that, break off from the British Commonwealth. One of the things that very few Americans grasp this is that at a very technical level, in 17, I can't remember the exact year. I think it was 88 or something like that. There was an agreement as part of the end of the Revolutionary War, where, in spite of our Constitution, we were relegated to being a member of the British Commonwealth as a colony. And that's never actually been broken. That's why you have a bar association based on the British common law court system and things like that. So most everything that in this paradigm that people look at and believe and understand, the reality is there's all sorts of issues in there that show that America actually is still being manipulated from afar by the Brits. And while we edge away from that frequently, just like the War of 1812 and then the Civil War, where they supported both sides, where promoted brother against brother. They've tried to manage America like we were a colony and use us to fight wars for them and do their dirty work, which we're doing in Ukraine right now. It's the Brits that want the war in Ukraine to keep Russia out of Central Europe and affecting where the money goes from these things. So there's a very strong, understanding that in some realms that we're still being managed as a colony of the British Empire, as a Commonwealth, and we're going to have to make a hard break from that, and that's some of what's coming, including things in the banking. Our treasury, people don't even know this, our treasury was technically shut down for the purposes of making our own money back in 1921. So there's all sorts of stuff related to that nuances that you really have to dig deep in there. And then there's plenty of people say no, that's not true and can't be, and you're wrong. But actually there's some pretty interesting stuff in there. This is the bankers war that we're in, like that. I mean, I'll use for example too, the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve is just a consortium of banks, and it's a private club. It's a private entity. It's a Puerto Rican corporation, and just down the street from the Federal Reserve is the IRS. The IRS is a collection arm of the International Monetary Fund. And your money that you pay in federal income tax does not go to do anything in the country. Those taxes are paid out of other things and out of debt that's created over at the Federal Reserve. So in order to get control of these various agencies and return to some kind of self-governance within the people here in America, we have to update a lot of these things. And you get into a murky area where most people just don't have time to dissect it. The ones that do, there's enough nuances where they argue over certain things. But in coming into a military environment, which will happen in the not too distant future, then while under this military control of the country and the functions of the country, then the commander in chief can do things without having to consult Congress or wait for courts to agree or whatever. And in fact, that is what was being conveyed in all of the Q information by those that were running that operation and still are. That team, it's not an individual, it's a team augmented by AIs. It's not AIs running it, they are being used to coordinate with exacting precision certain things that have to happen at certain timing marks. But all of that is about the greatest battle ever on the planet, which is the breakaway. Decisively cut the ties with the Brits, and that's a big one. That's a hard one for most people to swallow. You'll just have to kind of watch and see what happens and understand it, and then at the end of the day, we're not going to shoot ourselves in the foot. We're not going to lose momentum. The business of America is business, as Reagan said. So we have to maintain a certain hull speed to have steerage. We have to go through the water at a certain speed for the rudder to have any effect. We can't go dead in the water. So while things are being shut down, realigned, and started back up, you can't put the country in a non-moving position. You can very briefly, and you can coast, and that'll happen. Lights out for a few days, and then a restart. You know, when you want to reset the computer, shut it off. You know, wait 30 seconds, let all the uh, uh, energy be dissipated in the machine, and then you do a restart. And so that's what we'll do.
I think that's a very good comparison about everything that needs to happen. I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know you're super, super busy. What do you think needs to be the main focus of our country or of my listeners between now, or I guess within the next month exactly? What should be our main focus, and what should we, kind of put our energy into and um, focus on to, not be distracted by everything that they're going to throw at us? There's so much
Well, there is a
going on
threat.
behind the scenes.
There is a threat that is still present, that has been present and actively briefed on going back before the elections, significantly before it. That trigger wasn't pulled, but it's still viable and still a threat. So, what would it be used to do? And there's players that want to block Trump from coming in, from taking
Sure.
office, from being able to be there legally. Um, what and I'll be very direct and specific here. No mincing words or quibbling. Everybody in this audience should understand. Um, we caught China, Cuba, Venezuela, Serbia, and a number of NATO countries and people in those countries, including American citizens, involved in a massive conspiracy from a couple different angles to overturn and control elections in America. The group that was operating out of Venezuela initially and then out of Serbia more recently, with support out of Venezuela, and other places, including, by the way, Canada, with Chinese operatives and Serbian nationals and U.S. persons going into the election systems in America from a location in Canada, amongst others, and changing the vote and manipulating it in a very precise way. And we got it all. We got the people that did it, many in hiding, protective situations, but not in U.S. protective custody yet. And then, which won't happen until after Trump's back in power, we got some of the original equipment. We got the original metadata, which means we don't have a copy. We got the original, which is very important of things that they did. So we know exactly what happened at 2020. We know stuff from other elections. And in fact, the operators in the interviews that have been done by multiple parties and very well put together, all videoed, have acknowledged having flipped elections in 72 countries and put people into power, leadership positions that were not the people that the people in those countries voted for, to take control of those countries. So that activity is a act of war. By international law, you cannot subvert an election by a people. That's an act of war, covered here in the U.S. in the Law of War Manual. And so there's certain actions and penalties that are allowed to a nation who has been attacked in this way. And we are going to play all of those actions in response to this attack on America and its citizenry and its Constitution, its Bill of Rights, by those involved in this at the nation state level. That engagement won't actually fully happen until Trump is securely back in power. And then we will, one by one, go to war over each of these issues and the people that were involved in doing that. This isn't going to be a minor thing. And this isn't pretend. This isn't internet, BS. I'm just telling you. It's the basis for why we do have Gitmo. And some of the way that information came back into our vote system, when you know one particular final piece of it, which only a handful know, even within the work to gather the evidence. When you realize how it came in, that final piece, people's brains are going to explode, but you're also going to go, oh, that's why that particular individual had to hold office at that particular location, so they could use that agency's communication system to bring the information back in. And by the way, it wasn't CIA, and there's other components that they're in there with Leonardo and the Italians and all that. But the one that is the most critical, you've never heard yet. And that will come out at a later time, probably well after arrest. So what's in the near future? We're here at the year end. And I'm just going to be excruciatingly decisive in saying this. You are going to see arrests and of very prominent people, and you're also going to see the headlines internationally concerning these nations and their intelligence agencies, spy operations, etc., and their involvement in cooking the vote in the United States. We're going to go after them. And then when we're done kind of getting a grip on it regarding American elections, we're going to go after elections in other countries. And by the way, for example, South Korea, they had martial law instituted for nearly a day recently. But what was interesting, they only sent 100 soldiers to the congressional building and kind of held people in place for a little bit, waiting to hear the details. They sent 300 people to the national election headquarters. And because the national election headquarters is supposedly an independent agency of government, not run by either side and not subject to normal policing rules or investigation, the only basis on which the president could have anyone go into the National Election Center to gather data about anything related to a corrupt election was to declare military rule. And then they had the legal authority to go and do that. And that's exactly what they did. And then one of the things people have misreported that they went in and got data out of the servers and mirrored images like that. There was a little bit, but there was actually something else they were looking for regarding certain IDs in the system. And why is that? Because we have the IDs in other locations proving that those servers were directly involved in the flip of the vote, but done from a remote location outside of South Korea. And so, as part of the data, the president has said he won't back down, even though, they want to impeach him and everything else. Well, he's going to look good before it's all over. And that will happen in many other countries because each country has a little different law regarding their election material like that. So you're going to have a very dramatic year. Is this all over just because Trump's back in office? No. Is it going to be 5 years of this? No. But it isn't going to be overnight. You can expect that, much of the spring is going to be involved in stuff related to these battles and conflicts, and determining who's actually going to be in power and control at the end of the day. And this is why they're so scared as Trump comes in, because he comes back in, they cannot stop what's about to happen. And at the end of this early phase, many of these people will be in prison and getting ready for the next year or two to be tried on treason as traitors. And then many cohorts will also be. Only thing I can say, if you were involved in any way, if you have friend, relatives that you suspect was involved in any way, they should make friends with law enforcement and prosecutors as quick as they can. They might have a little window here, because once they're pulled into the rest of the trap, even small players are going away for a very long time for participating, knowingly or unknowingly. If you're the getaway car driver and they go into the bank and rob it and come out and get in the car, the law sees you as an accomplice guilty of everything that they do. If they kill somebody, if they wound somebody, scare grandma to death, you're on the hook for all of what they're guilty of, because you're an accomplice and an enabler. So the crimes that were done in the election process here are nation state level crimes. If you participated in a treasonous operation. It wasn't just a benign little oh gosh, I want to get my friend into the county commissioner spot so he can help vote for my land project, and I gave him an extra $20,000 to make it happen. It'll be far more extensive than that, because you're overturning the Constitution of the United States and violating everybody else's civil rights. So it's going to be a very dramatic period. And from a, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What should we do? Let me just say this. God shares his glory with no one. So before this is over, I believe that we will all but for the hand of God, we would all be lost. That God will intervene at certain critical moments where it could have gone a completely different direction. At Gettysburg, It was as simple as a change in the direction of the wind that ultimately decided the entire engagement at Gettysburg. Both armies, North and South, had been moving towards the area for an engagement, and it was going to be decisive. And so the movements took place over a week or two. Both commanders believed that they were going to be going into this battle 2 or 3 days later than it actually began. But there was a chance encounter between two forward operating groups that turned into a shootout and an exchange of cannon fire. With the wind blowing in the direction of the Union troops, the wind carried the sound of the cannon up to 20 miles away, and troops heard the cannons blasting and came running. And so there was a steady stream of Union troops moving to the sound of war. On the Confederate side, because the wind was blowing away from them, and this is why animals don't like to be in a situation where there's much wind, if they're the kind that could be prey, because they can't hear correctly. They like it quiet and settled, and then they can hear sounds coming from all different directions. That's why, like in packs of dogs or lions, they hunt moving against the wind so that their sounds are carried away from their prey. So in this case of Gettysburg, the wind moved towards the Union troops and favored them, and they came running. But the Confederate troops, even just a mile away, never heard the cannons blasting. And so the battle was on for hours and hours and hours before messengers got back to the troops, and the message spread, including the troops way far back. And they were slow in arriving at the battle, which meant that the Union troops greatly outnumbered the Confederate troops in the early part of the battle. And so they were decisive in this attrition of war and in getting to build out and prepare. Those critical hours changed everything. And people talked about it at the time as a hand of God type thing, because the wind normally blew the opposite direction that time of year, in that time of day. And so it was an unseasonable thing, the way the wind blew at that exact moment and favored the Union troops, and even came on strong enough to carry the sound as far as it did. In what's coming for us, it is a near-death experience for America. You're going to war with an entrenched globalista who is very sophisticated, has lots of treasonous traitors within our ranks, and a lot of experience and resources. And so we are going to, it's going to be a very gripping period of time. The other side of the coin is, because this has been mapped out, gamed out extensively, including with the use of artificial intelligence to play out all types of options. And this is actually a much longer operation than even just Trump coming on the scene. Trump has said numerous times he was invited to run. Who invited him? Okay. The people who've been in this fight behind the scenes from a military perspective for a very, very, very long time. And the part of the operation that is not understood, that everybody here, you can snicker, guffaw, whatever you want to do. I'm telling you, the Q operation was intended to lay out a map of things that were going to happen, people that were in the fray. And let me just do this. You've got a lot of believers in the audience. let me ask you a kind of a weird question.
Okay.
Daniel prayed when he was a servant in Babylon. And he prayed because he'd been castrated. He was never going to have children as a young boy. And then he was trained to be a scribe, and he came from a particular tribe that was known for its um, prophetic capabilities. So Daniel became a very honored person in Babylon, and he prayed and he asked God, "Your people are in slavery. The nation which you promised to Abraham and his seed is occupied by enemy forces, and the people are in slavery and being married off. You know, people like him had been castrated; he'd never have children. The women were, uh, you know, having children by men from other nationalities in slavery and like that. So, what was going to happen to the nation of Israel? God had made a promise to Abraham. Was his promise going to be voided? He'd made a promise to Isaac and Jacob. They'd made it all the way through the Egyptian captivity into the promised land and then lost it. What would be the end of all these things? And would the nation actually be restored? Would God's promise be fulfilled? How would this happen? And he prayed and fasted and didn't get an answer. And it went on and on and on. And then after a long period of time, uh, an angel showed up and told Daniel, "I was sent at the moment of your first prayer." Sent from where? From the time of the end, from the the moment when Israel would be restored and the people would be saved, and these enemies would be defeated. This angel walked across time like we walk across the street. This angel was told by God to go across time from the era that we would call Revelations now, go back to Daniel and tell him what he saw. Daniel didn't get a secondhand account. He didn't get well, it's going to be okay because in the future, this or this is kind of going to happen and no way to tell it. A firsthand witness who observed everything in the first person gave a firsthand account to Daniel after he walked across time. And he also told Daniel that on the way he'd been encountered by the Prince of Persia, a principality, a demon, a powerful entity, and that they had fought. And then he had to be relieved by another of the archangels who continued the fight with this angel over Persia, which was in Daniel's future. And in fact, where Daniel died in Persia. He has his tomb is there, and he's a very honored prophet in modern day Iran, even now. Daniel heard all of these things, including the battle that was in his future, from a first-hand witness across time. Here's my question. For all the Christians out there, for all the people, whether you're a Christian or not, has the account of Daniel about what the end of the world would be like, what was described to him by this angel, has that had any effect on the way you view the world? Has that caused you to look at the world in some kind of a different way? What happens with the Jews and Israel and all these other things? And if it has, then the future has affected the past because a messenger came from the future and told Daniel what was going to happen. He wrote it down And people have read it and seen it. Now, the same thing happened with John, the Revelator. John wrote of his revelations that he was given to walk and see firsthand. He was caught up in the Spirit and actually was purified with a hot ember for what he would speak, and then was given not just a vision, but a firsthand walkthrough about things that were in the future. And he was given certain messages to churches. And all of what he put down in Revelations within the American society and even across the world, those verses have affected our worldview. We, the future has affected the past. If you accept that those prophetic words were real. And what Daniel wrote down is exactly what happened with the Medes and Persians, and then future events that we see even now. Um, so it has colored our view of the world and anticipating what's coming. And I'm telling you that even within the Q operation, part of the strategy was to get young people. It was aimed at young people, gamers, people that would try to solve a problem inside the computer and the gaming world. It was something that was done to get people looking and thinking and exploring, but also to imprint on them certain events and clocks that as these future events came to pass, it would reinforce their understanding that this was part of a plan. See, Daniel was asking God, what's the plan? What's the plan? What's the plan? How are you going to fix this? Your people are in slavery. I myself, who believe in you and worship you and are your servant, I'll never have kids. How is this going to get fixed? That's what the Q operation did. It laid out what the plan was. And for those that looked deeply and sifted through it, even now, people that weren't watching at the time, they have a hard time figuring this out because you had to kind of watch it real time back then. You can look at something, but it's almost gobbledygook to you. But the ones that were following it, it's affected their worldview. And where they were 14, 16, 20 years old when the first Q drops happened in 2017, they are 7 years older and they have finished college. They've married. They're having their first kid. They're in their first jobs, and they understand this stuff way better than a lot of people think. And they can convey certain understandings of what was laid out in the plan and the exposure of the various components, the various people involved, in ways that help to stabilize the rest of society. There is a plan, it's being worked, and it's being proven out. And so, what's ahead? I can tell you very precisely. A scare event, near-death experience. And by the way, in a near-death experience, people are forever changed. People that have gone through a near-death experience, it captures you in a way that you can't be just dismissive of it. And some people have a heavenly near-death experience, and some people have a hellish near-death experience. Some people. Sorry, I had an incoming call I had to block. Moving through this, we as a nation on the far side of some of these events that are coming very shortly now, be forever marked in our hearts and our souls. It's like people that went through the Great Depression. They thought and operated in a completely different way. They didn't trust the banks. They weren't frivolous in their spending. They hoarded stuff. They got used to, you didn't throw away a piece of string. You saved everything because you didn't know what you might need, and you didn't have money to buy something if you did need it. There's a certain ingenuity, thriftiness, survival attitude that was instilled into the people that went through that era. The people that go through and that have gone through this last decade, really, and a couple of decades, but especially the events that are coming over the next many months, it will change their way of looking at the world for the rest of their lives, including the kids. And they will not easily forget it or turn away from it. And it's going to change the character of the nation. It's going to put people in a God-mindedness as a result of it, because even with all the best laid plans of mice and men, the projections, everything else, at the end of the day, even within the Q operation, it's said and resaid numerous times. We are in a battle against principalities and powers of darkness in high places, spiritual entities, and we need divine counsel, assistance, protection, provision, and God Himself. This is a nation under God. The covenants with God aren't just from recent generations. It goes back to the founding, to the pilgrims themselves. And so this is a nation that God will not share the glory with any man. He will protect it, and it won't be, Trump will have been iconic. Many others will have picked a side and play iconic roles. But I believe when we look back on this 3, 5, 20 years from now, 100 years from now, just like the wind, there will be subtle, simple, amazing things that, but for God Himself, we could have nuked each other to pieces. We could have suffered some other horrid fate, but God, via various agencies, will have spared us. And it will be because of the prayers of His people. And so even now, you ask me, what else should we be doing? Daniel prayed, and he got a insight into where things were going. John, when he received revelations, John said, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. He was worshiping God Almighty, our Father in heaven. He was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and these revelations were revealed to him, these understandings, these revolutions in heaven and in the earth were laid bare before him so he could see what was happening and where it was going. And it was the result of being in prayer. In Daniel's case, it was the result of a prayer, an ask, a request. And I would say to every listener here, I would say that we all need to be praying, God, what do you want me to do? How should I act next? What should be my point of engagement? And like I mentioned to somebody that's going through a Job type experience right now, that's very close to me and a very close friend. What's God want from me? What am I supposed to do? And I says, let's worry about today. And we'll let God worry about tomorrow. We got enough problems today to get you through. Let's just simplify the prayer down. God, what am I supposed to do today? How am I supposed to do it? I can't change tomorrow. You can. I can affect tomorrow by doing the right thing today. What is it I'm supposed to do today in this next step to, address all the issues that have come across in his life? I don't think that's wrong. I think everybody here, you know, I would say don't get your brain too far out there. We know there's drama coming. It's going to be epic. It's going to be unbelievable. It's going to be a near-death experience for the whole nation. Some will be more isolated, protected in the course of it, and others will be more right in the sights of it. So, at some level, you even put away, what's going to happen with so and so on the other side of the country in this other situation, or even friend in a tsunami. It's every man for himself. That's where the term comes from, because the water is so dense, it's moving so fast and wildly that even somebody just an arm's reach away is a million miles away, because the pressure, the density of the water hitting you is so great. You can't even fight it to save the next guy. You just have to find something solid to grab onto and get to higher ground in order to be able to survive. And then maybe from that higher ground location, out of the water itself, you can help others around you. We pray for God's direct guidance to us, our Father in heaven, to give us clarity. What are the next moves that I need to do right now? And then tomorrow I'll let you tell me the next moves and the next moves. And you stitch it all together and you'll get through it. But you can be so heavenly minded, so future minded. You're no earthly good. You're no good to yourself or the people around you. And by the way, that's not what God is wanting to direct you yet. You have to get one foot in front of the other. He gave us some insights to where things are going for reassurance, and that there's a plan, but all the intricacies of all the minutia, every person is kind of left blank in Daniel's account, is left blank in John's account. So we have to seek our own guidance for our own selves within the broader understanding that God does have a plan. Now, what do I do today so that I'm in alignment with your larger plan, Father God? So that's, if I was doing anything, I'd be praying, asking for divine guidance. God says, serious as you are, if you ask God sincerely for help and assistance and guidance and provision, he's a good God. He's not going to give you, you ask for bread, he's not going to give you a stone. So Father in heaven, Christ said, looking up, he wasn't bowing his head, he's looking up. And even he clarified it wasn't the father of the devil, it was the Father in heaven. So looking up, he would pray. He broke the bread. He blessed it. I'd be looking up and asking for God's blessing on all the people around you, on the world around you. Why is it? Because if God is to bless somebody, that means that they would be moving towards eternal life and his heaven. So even if you have somebody you don't like, somebody that's done something horrible to you, you pray that God would bless them. Because at the end of the day, all of your experiences are about getting through the pearly gate and ending up in a heavenly direction at the end of this life, and not blocked outside the gate. So even, I remember one gal that had and I've mentioned this many times over the years, she had a hellish near-death experience. And down in hell, all the things that she walked through to get to where was going to be her final resting place. And she was not a horrible, horrible person. She just had a drug addiction. And after she was saved, she had her only church contact had been go to vacation Bible school during a summer break with a friend, a neighbor friend. And she remembered one song, Jesus Loves Me, This I Know. And so she was right where she was about to be chained in place where she'd be forever. And she remembered that song in that instant. She says, Jesus, save me. and just remembering that song. And in the distance, there was the tiniest little light in this horrible place. And it just grew bigger and bigger. And just in a moment or two, it was an angel that broke this chain that they had on her and took her away. And after all this, and this is a long thing that she talks about, but at the end of it, one of the things she said, hell is so horrible. It was made for demons. It wasn't made for humans. It's so horrible that you wouldn't even wish it on your worst enemy. You wouldn't wish it on the worst Hitler, the worst, pedophile, whatever. You wouldn't wish it on them because it's that horrible. It wasn't made for humans. And even in what we do here, we should not be wishing hell onto people. The whole purpose of this life is to, get through to the other side and have a heavenly experience. That's the thief on the cross. At the last moment, even after being convicted of crimes and going to the cross, and for things that he was guilty of, he was able to receive forgiveness. And Christ said, "This day you will sup with me in heaven." And so, with that in mind, and God says he desires that all would be saved and that no one would perish. So, with that in mind, are we going to go against God's wishes? No, we ask that God would bless people, even our enemies. Pray for your enemies. And so we pray that even in the midst of all these things, including many people will go to, they will be judged. Their time in this world will be spent in prison for the rest of their lives, and their incarceration will begin shortly. And some of them will be hanged for their acts. But even there's the opportunity for repentance. Um, in even these worst situations. We don't wish hell on anyone. If God doesn't wish it on anyone, but people have free will, free choice. If God doesn't wish it on anyone, who are you? Watch your talk. You got a problem child. You got somebody that has done something horrid. You pray that God would bless them, which means that he would reveal himself to them. And in the course of that revelation, they would realize that what they've done, the consequences, what it means, and repent of it. And that would be, if you've been hurt, had to make some sacrifice, damaged in some way, if that was part of the cost to bring them to a point where through that they gained eternity somehow in some strange way, known only to God himself in many cases, then that should be satisfactory, because our goal here is to see everyone inside the kingdom and forgiven and have eternal life. Christ warned more about finding yourself in hell than he did about getting to heaven. About 4 times more
Right.
of the conversation was about avoiding hell. So anyway, I drone on.
No, that was so amazing. Oh my gosh, I could literally just listen to you for hours. Your insight is par none beyond. You're a far most requested guest I know all across the platforms for many people, and everybody just loves your insight and your perspective on everything that's going on. Now, I would love for you to close in prayer, but I do have one kind of off the road question. My husband was texting me. He said, okay, this guy travels all over and he has all these cool cars. He wants to know what your cruising music go-to is. He thinks it's like a ZZ Top or who do you say? Stevie Ray Vaughan. So what is it?
Well, I do have a longer beard like these top guys do. I trim it, but it grows fast. And but I'm a '60s kid, um, and I don't get to listen to music very often. Even when I'm driving, I'll tell you that I uh, I need the quiet anymore just to
Oh, I
gather
bet.
my thoughts on stuff that I'm doing. And I don't feel like I even have the luxury sometimes. I'll give you an example. Over the last couple days, I had quite a bit of travel, changing sides of the planet several times. Uh, uh, when we added it up the other day, it was like 70,000 miles in just shy of 3 weeks. Um, that's almost 3 times around the world. Uh, and with that in mind, even on the plane when I wasn't sleeping, I did watch a movie or two like that. But a lot of the time was spent in prayer because so much of the stuff is so urgent and gripping. And I do believe that prayer changes things. And I was very concerned on a couple of specific things. And so I felt I really needed to um, uh, focus in that. And so a lot of times I'm in the car, I'm usually on the phone. I just don't get a chance to listen to music. But um, that said, when I do get a chance, and I've got my headphones, and Jennifer will tell she wants to talk to me about something, and I've got those stupid headphones on. Well, I can't hear her because I noise cancel everything else out. She'll want to talk about something, but sometimes I do take just a little time, and I want to listen to something. Um, so it'll be things like, uh, and I don't think so much about the performer. I just enjoy certain of the music, but like Cat Stevens,
Oh
um,
yeah, he's good.
father and son, and he's Muslim, by the way. Uh, but some of the music is just amazing. Uh, Yesterday I had 15 minutes or something, and I was just kind of relaxing. I listened to a couple of Bread songs, which they had more number ones, I think, than the Beatles did. And there's a handful of Beatles songs I like, and of course Paul McCartney, the original Paul McCartney, died 9/11 of 1967, and so the replacement is part of the illusions that were fed in order to keep us in this in a certain paradigm, and that's a whole nother conversation itself. It's kind of like swapping out a uh, Michael into Michelle and lots of other things to keep us
Yes.
thrown off. But I still enjoy especially some of the early songs. Yesterday, Something in the Air, Here, There, and Everywhere. um, and I will I'll kind of, in fact, I'll tell you this. It's what's interesting about your husband's question is this. Um, and I've actually been working towards it for quite a long time, but I haven't had the time or the repose to do it. But in the not too distant future, there's 2 shows that I want to do a week. And we've set things up to do it, and but I haven't pulled the pin, even though we were close. Just because we're in such an urgent time right now. And the 2 shows I want to do a weekly show on just certain subject matter, not an interview, but a presentation, like what I used to do with Jen several years ago, and like that, um, on certain subjects, especially on the related to the holidays that we celebrate and certain event periods that we
Yes.
celebrate, which are based on um, uh, actually occult time periods, and people don't realize it. and weave in some of the events and people and way things evolved that will help people understand how the country's been hijacked and lay the foundations for trying to move us back onto an understanding closer to what the Pilgrims had when they came here. Um, Not in an antiquated way, but moving forward in a alignment with what God wants us to see and do. The other show I'd like to do, and in the early part of Christianity, um, in the modern era, if you will, a lot of the um, bar music and songs, people knew the tune, but they changed the words even into the churches. And so a lot of songs that were sung in those early eras of a song that was sung by the guys and gals in the bar um, because they knew the tune in some generic way. And then they got to participate. They didn't have radios and things like that, so you didn't know enough to it. So the music is interesting, but if you look at society, the songs that the musicians sing and people identify with it, and it conveys certain messages. Uh, there's some messages that I'd like to discuss and talk about and have people be able to think about, but I'd like to do it with music and some commentary in between, and they're on certain subjects. So I'll give an example, one that I have kind of mapped out in my mind that I think is an important one, and I wish I'd done it a year ago, 6 months ago. I just haven't had time, which is painful for me because I like just to take a break and have some repose and be able to do some of these things. But the one I wanted to do is the background of war, the background of how we get there and how it affects society, how we think as a people. And so much of that is reflected in the music and how people are thinking about. Some of it is stuff that most people in this audience would probably even be repulsed that I would even want to play the song or something. But there's a number of them that are fantastic, amazing. One Tin Soldier, uh, Blowing in the Wind. Um, there's many of Babylon with um, uh, trying to think of the performer did American Pie. Um, but there's a number of great songs there. One that probably Eric Burden and the Animals, Sky Pilot. The priest praying with all the guys and then sending them into the fight. And from the Vietnam War era. And I would hope that while enjoying the music and listening to it and listening to the words, um, it would also sometimes you have to just kind of have that moment of repose to reflect, and those messages are coming out of a kind of a deeper place. They find resonance with the people, but when you put them all together, it says certain things, and it causes you to think about where you are in your world and your society and how we're being conditioned to do other people's bidding. Um, and a lot of the performers were fighting against that with what they sang. They may not have been exactly right in the way they were revolting necessarily, and they may have not been doing it in necessarily a godly way, but there was other forces driving it. And so I think it's worth having some of that, have the conversation and pull some things out that people might not even remember. And there's other subjects. I mean, that's just on the subject of war. There's other many, beautiful things that the music's unreal. I mean, even look at where Trump's at with the music. Uh,
Somebody
I
asked,
love
and
the
not to interrupt you, somebody
yeah.
inserted that there's significance with the song YMCA that he always plays.
Oh yes. Well, the first YMCA. Here's the point. How many people know this? What was the year of the first YMCA, and where was it? It was in Boston, and it was in 1851. Okay,
Mm,
almost a decade before our Civil War began, and um, the YMCA has a lot of interesting things in there. Young Men's Christian Association. Uh, who knew that at Guantanamo Bay there was a YMCA? And so uh, much of what's coming is Guantanamo. It'll be one of the
that's
biggest
hilarious.
subjects. Every day, people will be looking to hear the latest news on what's happening at Guantanamo in the not too distant future. And by the way, also, um, for those here over at Patriot Party Network, PPN, um, my chief of staff, I was able to convince him he had to do this. And he's excellent. He is now a co-host over at PPN with Warren, one of the owners of the network, based out of Kansas. And they did their first show on Monday. I was their first guest on Monday the 16th, and you can go and find it, out in the net, whatever. I think it's 1776 at PPN or something like that. But people will find it. Matt Meck is my chief of staff, and he'll be interviewing guests over there with Warren. They've had just an astounding lineup put together for the next couple of weeks. Every one of them is absolutely powerful. And in fact, the one tonight, while we're doing this here, they're over there doing that, and it's Phil Lyman and Trent Staggs from Utah on their cases, which are before the Supreme Court of the United States right now. People don't even know this, which would cause the elections of 2024 for the governor and for U.S. Senate and for a couple of other races in the state to have to go back and be re-voted on, a whole new election.
Hmm.
And that's not minor talk. It's not, um, it's all the way at the Supreme Court right now. Can you imagine what impact on the country because of a fraudulent, illegal election that's been well documented? If they have to rerun the election, and by the way, if you got Trent in there, Trent Staggs, into the Senate, who Donald Trump, President Trump, endorsed. It's not one vote, it's two votes because the guy that they put in there in the election is an anti-Trump person and anti all of the appointments Trump would do. So um, uh, if you flip that, now you've eliminated a negative vote and added a positive. It's a 2-point swing in any Senate vote if that stands. It's a big deal, believe me. Everybody involved knows this is a monster. And anyway, they're over there with Matt. I'd encourage everybody to go over, and that's nightly, 7 p.m. Central at PPN. They're a powerhouse as far as their broadcasting system, and people that listeners like that. And why do I also emphasize that? Because Matt actually, as part of his service career, he was an A6 pilot. In fact, he was the first A6 pilot to go feet dry, which means cross the border into the country after being launched off a carrier. Um, he was the first Marine pilot and the first pilot, I believe, any aircraft to go feet dry into Iraq in the second part of the Desert Storm history. And just a ace of a guy, very, very, very knowledgeable. And you'll hear in those shows a lot of what he briefs me on daily in our morning brief. And she'll be getting it right from the horse's mouth. He's as knowledgeable on these things as anybody you're going to get, but he also has sat on tribunals at Gitmo as a one of the judges and presenters. He has he helped supervise the building of the media center at Gitmo, world-class media center, which is going to be used as these people are moved into detention there, and then the collecting of evidence and the attorneys coming in and having to prepare their clients for trial, and then the trial process. So Matt's going to be one of the most important influence people that you could ask for, and it'd be very hard to find somebody more qualified to talk at all the various levels that will be needed during the events that are going to take place at Gitmo. He lived there for a year and a half. He knows this stuff, and he's served on tribunals. He's an expert in these areas and on military affairs, and plus business and other things. He's got just, an unbelievable background. And he's just a gift of God for me and the stuff that I do. And he will be a huge help to the country as we walk through these days in the not too distant future.
I've enjoyed our conversation so much tonight, and I have so many more questions. We'll save those for another episode, though. It is getting late, I know, where we both are. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to hit on a few hot topics with myself and my audience. And I know how much you're appreciated, and just your time is so valued. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming back on the Patriot Strong podcast.
Well, I always enjoy it. You've got a super audience, and I'm looking forward to continuing to do this, but I am also pretty pressed on a lot of fronts right now as we get through this next window. But I think if you get right down to it, it's interesting to get all the little stuff and kind of think about it. This next phase is going to be very personal. So, it'd be my prayer that at some point you get insight, knowledge, all the other stuff, and then you have to apply it. And so hopefully the stuff that I've shared over time and some of the stuff that I sometimes people want me to just say this one thing, say this other thing, just say it, and Christ used parables and analogies and things like that. Why? Because your situation is going to be so unique. If I give you some comparables, then you can use the basic understandings and messages and apply it to your situation. If you just want black and white, Nino, well, just tell me, just black or white. It's this or it's that. I don't think it. I don't think it helps people as well as at least get you in the zone. But then every person here is going to have a very unique story about this period of time.
Absolutely.
And their understanding and the way that God himself, their Father in heaven, got them through it. And so if I'm not communicating quite as much during some of it, I don't know what will happen. We'll have some windows where we're not going to be able to talk directly. Hopefully there's enough there that everybody here will be able to apply things from their own understanding and with divine insights. And we get together, they'll all have their own stories and parables for the rest of us. So it'll be a fun time.
Well, again, I thank you so much for everything that you've done the past years. Keeping us close to the fire with the little drips and the breadcrumbs, so we can kind of connect it all in our own way, just like you were saying. I would love to close in prayer for just to continue. What you were saying, we need to live in prayer daily and always turn to God, give it to Him. He'll guide us. So if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, sure. Father God, I thank you for every person here. I thank you for the way that you got them here, and that they have um, open hearts and minds to consider some of these heavy and different subjects. And we know that there's all sorts of precise information and details, and it can occupy all our moments, um, that is important and that we do want to know and need to know. But at the end of the day, we also know that this is about a relationship with you and getting into your heaven and being received at those pearly gates at the end of this life. And for those that are around us to likewise um, be received, and that we would be some part of that happening, whether it be family and friends or people we have no knowledge of. I ask you, Father God, to reveal your will, your timing, your way to each one of those here right now, that it would be unique, that no man can get in the way of your message for each of these people, and that even circumstances and the distractions of life would move aside so that they can hear your voice in their own heart, uh, your own your own words, your own voice for them, and what they should be doing and preparing, and how they should be acting, operating in the days and weeks and hours to come, but on a daily basis. I pray that you would open your word to them, that they would have fresh insight, that they would have some place that they find uh, scriptures or a study each day that helps them, that is a point of entry, a portal of your thoughts and word and understanding into their consciousness, so that they are um, hearing you on a daily and even an hourly basis. Give each one of them a prayer that suits your purposes and releases your authority in their own life and in the uh, lives of people around them. Make them the head and not the tail. Uh, give them favor amongst their peers in the midst of the crises ahead, and um, give them wisdom, which is of you, that is beyond even the wisdom of men in the situations ahead, and um, allow each of them to enjoy uh, the victories that you will bring with them as their partakers in your work in the times just ahead, in taking control of the helm of the ship of state and returning America to a godly nation, and opening opportunities for us on the far side of that to go out and help others around the world to recapture control of their nations against these dark and evil forces, these Luciferian Baal worshiping forces, that we would enjoy a period of repose to collect ourselves and enjoy the world that you've created for us, and that we would all here get the opportunities to enjoy each other's company, and uh, each one with a story of your action, your presence, your favor to bring us through these problems ahead uniquely, um, by your hand, individually and as a nation. We ask for that, Father God, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Yes, thank you so much. That was I couldn't think of a more perfect way to close out our conversation. Thank you so much for all that you're doing, Juan. You know, really fast, you mentioned Nino a little bit ago. I have to throw in my friend does this amazing magazine, Andrew Magazine, that if you guys are looking for a print media to subscribe to, Andrew Magazine is it. The Commander's Chief, you've seen his work with General Flynn at all the Reawaken events and everything else. I pinned there's a pinned comment in the comments below. You guys can go get your own subscription. And you know, one of our friends in media, he has his own cover right there too. A great alternative print media for you guys to dig into. You guys, thank you so much for joining myself and Juan tonight. I hope you took a lot from this conversation. Juan, thank you so much again for your time. You are amazing, and I'm so grateful for everything that you're doing.
Hey, it's a team thing. All you guys are amazing. I'm glad to have you guys in the clubhouse with me. So let's go have some fun. Let's go take this country back and have some fun along the way. All
Absolutely.
right,
you guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode. God bless you. God bless this country, and together we're Patriots strong. Bye, guys.
good night.